Been working with Alfresco since the beginning of Alfresco, course of really since 2007, so over the course of the last 5 years, and drive that. So what we're going to talk about today is building Web CMS solutions for Alfresco 4 and the approaches and considerations for developers, right? But I'm going to approach it from the context of what we've learned and what we've gone through, so there'll be some craft derivative in here. It's not meant to be a promotion, and if we have time for a demo, we'll do that. But I want to make sure we take your questions, and if you really want to see a demo, then you can stop by our booth and we can get deep into it. I have a little bit of a cold, so if in the middle of the talk I sound like Matt Foley, I apologize. Now, Alfresco has if you look at the Alfresco literature, it says that Alfresco provides web content management services. And so Alfresco doesn't provide a solution necessarily for really rich web content management. They provide a set of capabilities that we're going to talk about that can be brought together to create various types of solutions. And if you have fairly simple use cases, you can use Alfresco out of the box. The more complex you get, the more things you need to do in terms of development. So Alfresco provides this really strong platform to do that, and that's what we're going to talk about. And so, of course, we're talking about software development, and the amount of development that you do depends on what use cases you're trying to solve. And so, of course, if you've got a small amount of use cases, if you've got a very focused problem, then you can create a very targeted solution to a small amount of development. And but like you said, Alfresco's generally deployed in larger organizations. If you look at Alfresco's customer list, it's over 2,000 customers, world's most well-known brands. And here we can see just a few of these. And I know a few of them are running websites driven from Alfresco. Okay. So when we're talking about these types of web content management use cases, they need a lot of capabilities. And we'll really start talking about alternative type solutions for large proprietary players in the space. And that's what I'm going to focus on. So if you've got a small use case and you're looking for like some guidance on what to do with Alfresco for that use case, then you want to cherry pick ideas from what I've got here. And what I'm going to talk about is kind of like building that alternative solution for these bigger players. And you can either take this advice and go out and build your own, or you can get involved in our open source project and commit and and collaborate with us. We'd love it. Okay, so this is just a few of the players that I think the kinds of closed source players that we're talking about providing an alternative to. Okay, I really like here how Oracle's very innovative with their logos. And if you're going to provide an alternative to these solutions, you're not going to compete necessarily on features out of the gate. These guys have a long head start, so you're going to need to bring something to the party. You're going to need to be more open than they are, or you're going to need to be more lighter weight, easier to develop for, more agile. You need to have better performance. You're going to need to be cheaper. At least a few of these attributes, and ideally you're going to have to be able to provide something that's 10x in one or more of these categories. So let's talk a little bit about what these kinds of platforms provide. So this is a list of the categories. I just put them on the screen so that you can use the slides later. I'm going to go through each of these now. So the first is content capture and review. And remember, even with all the most recent use cases with mobile and everything, and like this bidirectional communication, content is still king. So you need ways to create and capture content, and you need ways to see that content as you're creating it, preview it, and make sure it looks right before you send it live. Then we have multi-channel publishing. This is the ability to take content and reuse it across different channels, whether that's your website or your portals or social networks or mobile devices. So single source of content, multiple delivery points. There's targeting. That's the ability to get the right content to the right audience at the right time. And So a platform's got to be able to provide a dynamic, personalized experience for each individual. There's social engagement. Now, I have a lot of logos up here that makes that look like we're talking about just social media integration, but social engagement from my perspective means not just social media, but the ability for users to talk back to you. Either that's through actions on your website, that indicate their intention and what they want and what they need, or through direct commenting and polling and that kind of thing, as well as the social platforms. There's business intelligence. So once you've got an engaged audience and you're putting content out and you're listening back to that audience, you need to monitor those actions. You need to monitor the content you're getting out to them. You need to find out how effective that is. And if it's not effective, you need to be able to change and test again. That's business intelligence. There's campaign management. That's the ability to organize that conversation and get it to the right place, get the right people to the right place within your organization. Okay. And there's profile and CRM. So today, in today's web, it's much less anonymous than it ever was before. People were really putting their identity out online, and they're starting to expect a similar experience at a brick and mortar store to their online presence. And so they want you to know who they are, which means that every interaction is going to go to like a CRM system, and they want that, if you can feed that back into your profile and give them a customized experience on your site and on your mobile applications, that's a big bonus. There's e-commerce, of course. If you've got products to sell, you want to be able to bring those to the market in any way possible. And so again, that's the list of content. Now, the list of capabilities. Now, before we start talking about how to implementing these, you need to think about which capabilities you're going to implement first. Obviously, all the different platforms that we looked at specialize in one of these, in a few of these areas better than they do in others. So every platform has its strengths and weaknesses, and so you want to decide where your strengths are going to be and where you're going to focus, and that's based on the business goals and the content strategies that you're going to support. So once you figure that out, you can then focus on building the tools. And this is the same thing when you do an engagement, right? You start by looking at what's the goals and then what are the tools and so forth. Now, Alfresco is a platform. Again, why build on it, Alfresco? Well, since its inception, Alfresco has been a very, very strong central repository for all of your content, not just web content, not just documents, not just records. Alfresco is a generic system that can store all kinds of content and capture metadata on all that content. The more content that you get into that repository, the more cross-pollination you can have in terms of its value and the better value you're going to get for Alfresco. So, and we're going to talk about a lot of the capabilities that the platform has for WCM. But it's important not to sort of put blinders on and think about Alfresco's applicability in a specific vertical that you've seen a talk on. So again, Alfresco can serve as a great system of record, a place for all of your content, different content types to exist. This really helps users be able to search and understand and find their content. And once they can do that, then they can reuse that content across the different channels and be more efficient. Alfresco also is it provides a lot of great collaboration capabilities that to help people maximize the value of that content. And it provides a really strong technical foundation. So let's talk about that. So at the heart of Alfresco's technical foundation, and this hasn't changed since day one, and this is one of the things that really inspired me in 2005 to get involved in Alfresco, which is this layered approach to the architecture. And at the base of it is the storage layer. On top of that is a content layer, and then a services layer on top of that, and a distribution layer on top of that. And we're going to talk about each of those things. So at the services layer, this is where you have the raw data, the content itself, the metadata itself, your search indexes. And this content, at this level, everything's managed by Alfresco. You'll never touch it. with human hands, right? You'll never touch it with any applications. You can't get to it. This is Alfresco's domain here. Above that, we have a content layer. This is where you take that raw data and content and metadata, and you map it to your business with content models and information architecture, right? This is where you put your business around that. And above that, there are services that help you interact with that content and work with the content and other people working on that content in a safe way, right? So everything that you do in Alfresco, you're going through this service layer. And it doesn't matter in what avenue you come into Alfresco, you're always going through that layer. So your content is always safe, and everybody's getting at it in a consistent way. Now, the services layer is only available inside the repository, and that's why we have a distribution layer, right? So you can have a service-oriented doesn't mean web services, right? Web services are a distribution capability, ability to take that service and make it available remotely. And Alfresco provides a lot of different distribution capabilities, web scripts and the content management and our operability standard. And there's RAR, which is a remote Java interface that looks just like the Alfresco repositories. It's great if you're doing a Java-based integration. And then there's these projections, right? And a projection is just another distribution layer, but what it is like basically the ability to work with native desktop applications and connect to the repository as if it is a shared drive or a web dev server or an FTP server, or your InDesign tools, your Creative Suite. All of these things can just talk to Alfresco as if they are talking to their native services like an email server or a Creative Suite backend. Now, I just want to talk about a few key services, I think, for web content management. And the first is locking, and locking is like one of the foundational collaboration services, right? And web content management has a lot of collaboration in it, and you really want to make sure that users aren't colliding with each other or overwriting each other. So this locking is what helps here. The next is versioning, okay? And so we need to be able to make changes to our content. We need to be able to go back and get old versions if we make mistakes. Now, it's important to understand the way that Alfresco's versioning works if you're going to do web content management in Alfresco. And that way that it works is that every file in the system has its own history, its own version history. So there's no relationship between those versions, between those assets to each other. So if you revert one, you're just reverting that single file. So you have to have a way of creating those relationships. And this diagram here shows how we can revert a page which may be made up of like 10 to 30 assets and still maintain the relationship to the page-specific assets that were there when the page was 10 versions back. And at the same time, if you have a shared asset, you wouldn't want that to revert because that may be used somewhere else. So you want the latest asset there. So you need a way to model that. We have a blog on this and this approach, so you should go read that. And there are other approaches here too. I know Chris Dixon, I don't think he's here, but he has a solution for this problem as well. There's metadata extraction, and so you've got all kinds of assets, videos and images and documents that come with all kinds of rich metadata, and Alfresco is really good at reaching into those documents and pulling that metadata out and putting it into the repository so your authors can use those assets better. So we just get that for free from Alfresco. There's workflow. Now, I do a lot of WCM engagements, and I don't really see a lot of heavy workflow in a lot of use cases. In WCM, people want simple, single-step approvals and that kind of thing generally. But there are times when HR needs to approve something, or legal needs to approve something, and for that we have the activity workflow engine. And I can't say anymore that you can launch a space shuttle with an engine like this, but you can pretty much plug in any actions to it, and you can model all kinds of parallel flows and that kind of thing with it. So it's a very powerful engine. The next thing it has is image transformation, and as we move towards more and more towards this multi-channel and mobile world, image transformation is really important because people pay for every single bit that they transfer to their phone, and they have to wait on low bandwidth, high latency networks. So Alfresco out of the box has image magic, and it can do scaling, and it can do cropping, and it can do image rotations and filtering, and it's really powerful. And we use this a lot. Alfresco has a deployment capability out of the box, and so this is where you can really, just leverage Alfresco out of the box to do some pretty simple WCM use cases. And so you've got simple file system deployment, you've got different social channels deployment all out of the box, and you can plug in your own, and that's what we've done with Crafter River. We have our own agent plugin, so it's a pretty powerful capability. And so those are the basics. I think those are primary basic services that you want to consider. Now I want to talk about actually constructing a platform. And the first thing you want to do in a platform is you want to decouple the organization. What we typically see on engagements is that we've got really creative people who want to be able to iterate very fast and get communication out to their markets, on an ongoing daily basis. And unfortunately, there's just too much of a technical barrier for them to publish. They end up publishing once a week, or and they need to go through development or go through IT to get that done. So one major goal with a platform like this is that you need to make sure that that doesn't need to happen. An editorial team should have no technical expertise really in order to create content. And you should be able to support like a web ninja, somebody who knows CSS, JavaScript, FreeMarker, basic coding things. And these two audiences, these two groups, they should be able to work in a production environment. Even if they're deploying to like a staging preview or whatever, that's part of the production environment. We really wouldn't, staging I think is a bad word for that in a sense, but this is a production environment. And then, of course, you are going to end up needing to integrate with business backend systems, so you're going to need development from time to time. But these people aren't working with the system on a day-to-day basis, and they need to go, because of the work that they do can impact the performance profile of the system and the quality profile of the system. They need to go through dev, they need to go through QA before they can deploy to production. And of course, IT, who has been saddled with a lot of extra burden in many organizations, should really be focused on keeping the dial tone on. And that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that they can be focused on making sure the OS is up to date and things are the latest versions and that kind of thing. Now, this is the way that we've developed our architecture. Of course, you can connect your website right to Alfresco and have live people come in and talk to that. But what we've done is we've said, let's use Alfresco to store content, to manage content. We're going to build a vertical authoring application on top of that. And then when that authoring process is done, we're going to, and workflow is complete and approvals are complete, we're going to publish that content to a completely separate infrastructure that we can scale out horizontally, that has none of these additional functionalities, and it's really just focused on delivering value to your public visitors. Our platform in Alfresco is a plugin to Alfresco Share for the UI and a plugin to Alfresco, the repository for services. And then we, even on the delivery tier, we use a smaller installation of our delivery engine to provide like a preview capability. So as I'm editing, I can see what I'm doing. So we're very happy with this architecture. It served us very well. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about each piece of this architecture. Now, we already talked a lot about Alfresco, and one of the key things that we do with Alfresco is that we store all of our content as XML, right? So you can store content in Alfresco as nodes with properties, right? And you create models with the XML definition, and you install that model into the repository, and then you can store your metadata into that. But what we do is we capture the content, we put it in XML, or we capture the raw assets and put those into the repository. And only if you need to do authoring search, then do we create a content model and extract content into that. And the benefit of that is that if you need to port that content from one system to another, you really just connect to your repository through like a shared drive and pull the content out and put it in another system. It's that easy. And when we deploy content from Alfresco to the live site, we're just deploying XML and assets. Now I want to talk about authoring, like authoring as a whole. So this is a more zoomed in picture of our architecture. And we can see here Share and some of the things that we've done, custom dashlets and custom themes and that kind of thing. And you can see our delivery engine on the side as a separate application, and these things talking to Alfresco. And the key thing here is that our authoring experience is actually mashed up over top of that preview, so that as the user's looking at the site, they have access to all their tools. And that's really important because it makes it easy. They can see problems and they can click at it and change it. And to keep that clean, we use kind of like the same functionality as a Google map, right? We do a mashup. So all the code that creates that authoring user experience actually lives in Share and is brought in through Ajax and mashed up on over top of the rendering of the site on the preview server. And now in Share, the actual chemical composition of Crafter Studio, our platform, is really like basically a ton of JavaScript, a little bit of application services that don't belong in Alfresco, a little bit of dashlets, a little bit of Share, a little bit of Surf. So we're not actually using a lot of Share. And the reason that we went with Share in the beginning is because there's two reasons. The first is we wanted to be focused on building the value for web content management. But Alfresco, and we want to deploy into these enterprises, and Alfresco already provides, an ability to integrate with LDAP and all kinds of other authentication, and so we don't have to build any of that. And Alfresco also provides a lot of collaboration capabilities, and so we can take advantage of those as well. And going forward for us, we're just going to continuously ask, is Share the right place for us to be? And if the answer is not a yes, then it should be pretty easy for us to port out because most of the application is JavaScript. And I really like this. If we drill into that architecture just a little bit more, you can see that we split our architecture up into layers as well. We have a client tier, and that's a completely JavaScript layer. There's a UI layer in the JavaScript, and there's a data layer or a services layer. So the UI calls services, which are just wrappers for REST calls, which get called down to the application layer, which is Share. Now Share generally, the service doesn't really exist in Share because the actual content service is in Alfresco. So we just proxy through Share to Alfresco. But we do that, we always talk to Share because we don't want our application knowing about lots of endpoints and that kind of thing. So we just talk to one location and proxy from there. And when it comes to service construction, there are 3 types. I really should have reversed this diagram, so I apologize for that. I'm starting to sound like Matt Foley here. Sorry about that. Okay, a little bit better. So I'm going to start from the right. Okay, so there's a type 3, and we use type 3 service. We use this for prototyping. It's the ability to write your this is web scripts here. So you can write a web script completely in JavaScript and FreeMarker and deploy it, and you can change that without doing any code. And this is a great way to put your back-end developers and your front-end developers and have them move at the same rate. No waiting for server reboots or that kind of thing. So it's a great way to prototype. As you become more and more comfortable with what the backend's doing, you can codify that into Java, and that moves you to the type 2, where you can still kind of change things at the distribution layer, at the web script layer. So you have a POJO service, but your distribution layer remains in this very flexible JavaScript and FreeMarker. And when everything is good to go, you want to change those over to Java all the way because it's going to be more performant. And a great use case or a great reference for this is that's the way CMS is developed in Alfresco. They were actually in the meetings with the CMS group, and they're saying, well, what if we move the standard in this direction? And they just change the code right there during the call. And so we'll look like this. So in Plugfest, Alfresco could just make things happen. Okay. Another thing that you want to do in this kind of environment is you want to make things pluggable. You want to make sure that every aspect of your user interface can be, you can add new modules. You can take things out that aren't relevant for customers. We've really tried to do that. Everything that we have in our user interface is a module, and it can be turned on and off just through configuration, so you don't have to restart a server or anything like that. And this is easy to do because of our JavaScript based application. We want to make sure that the system allows people to do less work and get more results. And the example, just one example, and this is the versioning picture. And it doesn't exactly show what I want to show here, but again, remember I said every web page has like 10 to 30 or more assets associated with it. Well, authors don't care about that, right? They care about creating pages. And all those images, that's just a page to them. So the system should basically figure out what those dependencies are and publish them. Or if I copy that object from one place to another, it should copy those assets. So dependency management is an idea of less work, more results. We want to allow creators to touch their work, right? The more latency you put between the time that a creator has an idea in their brain to the time that they can get their idea onto a canvas, the lower fidelity that and lower quality that idea is going to be able to express. And so, again, like the core idea of the platform is to get IT out of the middle to reduce that time, which is huge. But then, as you remove that problem now, it's all about getting to the point where somebody has an idea and they can see it immediately as they work. And so this is just an example of what we've done here. This is our rich text editor. And so here you see an editor, they're authoring right in their own styles. So if they update their style sheet, it updates in their rich text editors. And as they're working, they can see what that would look like. And then they can save and see it right on the page. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about Crafter Engine. So Crafter Engine, not Crafter Engine, but delivery. So considerations for delivery tier. So you don't want that delivery tier to be dynamic and personalized. And the way that the consideration there is, so are you going to bake versus fry? Obviously, if you bake everything, if you turn everything into a static HTML, you can't have a dynamic site. It'll be really performant, but it won't do anything interesting. So there's a various degree from partially baking to full-on frying. And so what we do is we ship all of our assets over to the delivery tier as these XML and static assets and so forth. And when a user tries to access them, we go to disk, we pull those objects off of disk, and we put them in memory. We consume them and put them in memory as really lightweight map-based objects. And then we can fry them with free marker templates to create, so there's your separation of presentation and content. The content is the object, free marker is the presentation. So we can bring those together in a very performant way. So you need to be dynamic, but you also need to be performant. And that's what this slide is all about. You need to be performant. And this is Tomcat, right? This is a average box, a little laptop, and you're just pounding on the laptop with JMeter. And a hello world, a JSP that's a hello world, and you can do a lot of page views per minute with Tomcat that way. And this is our platform. Obviously, if we're frying a page, we're not going to get that kind of performance, but it's still a lot of page views. Even if you have, it's a basic dynamic page with a few queries, and you can see that we can still do a lot of page views. And conservatively, we would tell a customer, count on something, close to 1 million page views an hour for a single node. And then see what your specific use case will dictate. And one of the ways that we get there is to try and get rid of these, any heavy database access. The way to make a web page fast is to get the request into the system and back out of the system as fast as possible. And if you've got to go reach out to a lot of secondary systems to get things done, you're going to have a slow web page. So the more database calls you need to make, the worse. And sometimes you'll need to make database calls, but you just try to avoid it. And so again, our system doesn't have a database on the deployment end. We put content on the disk, and we know how to pick it up off the disk in a quick way. And we index everything into Apache Solr. That's what this slide is. We index everything into Apache Solr so that if we need to do a dynamic query, we can go with the attributes and so forth, make the query, and then again, go pick the content up of disk or out of memory, more often out of memory. And then serve the content. You want your system to be pluggable. That means that, you're going to need, the delivery tier needs to allow you to bring specific business functionality into the system. And what we've done is we use our delivery tiers based on Spring MVC. And so if you want to bring new functionality into the system, you can code Java classes, and you can create Spring Beans, and you can even override our Spring Beans. So our system is completely pluggable through Spring, and all you're doing is packaging that stuff up as a jar, putting in the shared class path of your servers, and you've got new functionality. Those beans become available in your templates, and again, they can become controllers at the server layer and all kinds of things. You want to be scalable. And one approach for being scalable is to share nothing, right? So it's easy to scale things if you're stateless and you don't share resources. And one thing that we do is we'll ship content to each of our nodes so that the content's easily available there. Another thing that we do is we build our delivery tier out of a few different WAR files. So there's a couple things going on here. This diagram's not 100% clear, but we have a Crafter engine WAR file. We have a Crafter search WAR file, and then ultimately we have a search WAR file. And that search is just basically gives us a join point if we want to plug in other search and query capabilities. The deployer is a small Jetty application that channel plugin that we have from Alfresco. It's deploying to that deployment agent over HTTP and making that content available on disk to Crafter engine, and it's pushing it in, creates updates and deletes into the Solar index so that those changes are available immediately. And if we look inside Crafter engine, this is the makeup of this. We think we have some good scalability, so I'm just willing to share this. This is, again, Spring MVC is at the core. FreeMarker, which is, I think, 1.6 times faster than Velocity and very user-friendly, right? It's very forgiving if you make mistakes. So that's our presentation tier. And then we have this library we call Crafter Core. And so we could actually, not use a Spring framework, but some other framework. And Crafter Core is that reusable piece that knows how to pick those XML files up, consume them into maps, and make them available, cache them, and that kind of thing. So that's our core piece. And by having WAR files, one of the advantages of having these separate WAR files is that I can tier these things out. I can create lots of instances of these things, and I can tier them out into separate layers if I need to as well. So I can have a search tier and an application tier and an Apache tier. Now, we always put Apache in front of our engine because Apache serves images and other static assets a lot faster than Tomcat. If the file gets big, Apache can be like 30 times faster, and that really just comes down to the fact that C is better at I/O than Java at a certain threshold. And so that's 30 minutes. We have a 50-minute session, so I'm going to take questions for at least 10 minutes. Go ahead. Like faceted searches and faceted searches, or oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, people are doing more and more semantic markup. I don't see any RFD or anything like that, or RDF. I don't see that kind of stuff. But I mean, people are really working hard to take advantage of some of the semantic markup that HTML5 brings. But that's not RDF, I know. But yeah, I haven't seen it. We're doing a lot of projects. One of the I mean, this isn't to do with the talk, but well, I guess we can get into that later. I'll come back to that. Any other questions? Guys have to have some questions. Okay, presentation. A demo, trial by fire. Okay. So this is our preview server. We're actually looking at that authoring component of one of our websites. You can manage any number of websites in our platform. And here we're looking at just an article page in the preview, and we can see we've got a tool. Our authoring tools are available to us. And we can turn it on and off, the ability to edit certain fields. Again, if I just want to edit, this area here, I can just go down here, click on that, and here I see Rich Text Editor. I see my styles right here, so I can just make an update. I'm so creative with this stuff. And then here's another style. So. Okay, let's save and close. So just now, I've seen that. I'm editing that style, and now I see it on the web page. Now everybody else sees it on the web page as well who's in this environment. That's a rich text editor. You can get much more complex than that. We've got a bunch of fields here for the author, and you can edit a bunch of fields together too. So I can just click on this pencil here, and that'll bring up different fields that represent that author. So I can make updates to that as well. Okay. So this is an author making edits to content, right there. Again, the idea that I'm just working with a canvas. I don't have to know a lot of technical things. I don't need to know HTML to make things work. I just have my style sheets. I just have my tools. And I'm getting stuff done. If I'm a web ninja and I'm responsible for making changes to my CSS, to templates, then I have access to my page templates. I just click on page template and I can actually make changes to the structure of the page. And if I scroll down, you can see places where here we've templated with the author and the publish date and that kind of thing. So that's the separation of the content and the presentation. And the frying occurs when the engine merges those two things together and serves a kind of a personalized experience. Now, in this case, it's a static experience because that content doesn't change for anybody. But if we go to like our home page, then if we look at this content, then if I look here, I've got content. I've modeled some criteria into the content. Here I'm serving this content to all users. That's my intention. As I go through and I mark up my content for different segments, that's part of the battle. It's part of the battle as the author. But now, before I can send something live, I need to see it as those audiences would see it. So we have tools to allow them to see that because, again, we want to reduce that time for feedback. So again, they can go in, they can define personas. And a persona is not a user, it's a type, an archetype of a user. And they can scroll through and see, they have an image and they have a description. And you can have arbitrary properties that make up that persona. In this case, it's just a segment, it's a customer. And so they can assume that persona, and they're going to get different content. And if I go in and look at this content, and I scroll down, I'm going to see that content is marked up for a customer. So I'm getting dynamic content here. And just a simple way to create dynamic content in the system is to just go after the Solar index, again, which is custom built. These indexes are very fast and designed for this kind of performance. So if I look down here, I can see a query. So I've got, find me all content of type tout, which just means promo, and make sure that the segment in the content matches my segment in my profile. And if I don't have a segment, assume that I'm anonymous, or match it with content that's been given to everybody. But what's really important is that I'm going to get back a list of mixed results if I give a query like that. And because of these indexes, you got all kinds of powerful boost capabilities that you wouldn't have to build if you had like a database. So we can say, hey, content that matches my segments 10 times or 100 times or whatever, more important than this content that's for everybody. So prioritize that first. So that's just dynamic content baking. We talked about editing the template for at the page level, but of course components can have templates as well. Try to think if I have an example of that. So I do. So here, here I have an RSS feed. We just did this in our training on Tuesday. We talked about building an RSS feed where you just take a jar file with Rome in it and put it into your system, and then that bean becomes available, and you can go out and get RSS feeds. So if I click on, if I click on the pencil, here I can see, okay. Oh, actually, that's not what I want. So that's the I'm mapping that component into the region here. Let me get rid of that. Click on the component. So the blue pencil means that you're editing the component. The yellow pencil means you're editing the page. We really want to show that if you touch the blue pencil, you could be impacting somebody else because you're editing a shared asset. So here, a form I made this field like huge, just in case somebody wants to put a really big URL in there. And again, just to show that you can do different things. But this is just a widget that has, the only thing you can configure is what blog is it going to go to. And so we want to go out and get that content from that blog, but we want to be responsible for the way that it's marked up. So we're going to have a template for that as well. So if I click, oh, sorry, I clicked on the edit button again. So what I'm going to do now is I click on the component, and here's my template. So what do? I'm saying, hey, for the RSS feed surface that we created, oh, this is hard-coded, it should be templatized. Go out and get these, go ahead and get this feed, and if entries exist, then iterate through those entries and print out the title in our own markup, print out the author in our own markup, and print out the summary in our own markup. So we have complete control over the presentation of that content on our site. And here we can see that we can modify. If we modify this template, we're going to modify every instance of that around the site. Another thing we talked about is multi-channel. So how am I doing on time? Just want to make sure I'm fair to you guys. We got some time. Another thing you want to do is be able to see how your content's going to look in different channels. Just like we looked at content for different personas, what you're going to publish to, you're going to have people coming in on your mobile phone or your iPad. So you need to be able to see what that's going to look like. So we have this idea of publishing channel. You pull that down, pick the channel that you want, and pull up the iPhone and see what that's going to look like. And we can do responsive design. And we can also do, we can detect what type of device you're coming in or a group of devices and map that to a specific template. And that's the approach that we like, okay? We like a kind of a hybrid approach of both a little bit of responsive and templates. And the reason for that is responsive design, you send the whole page to the device, and then you figure out the viewport, and you get rid of stuff. But again, people are paying for every bit that you transfer to them, and they're waiting for every bit that you transfer to them. So what you do is figure out like keystone devices along the way and create templates that present the right amount of content for that type of device. And then, of course, you're not going to create templates for every device, so you're going to have a lot of gaps in that. So you're going to let the responsive design fill the cracks, right? And that's just that's a good approach. It saves work for you, and it creates a really great experience. And the iPhone is it's a browsable device too, so we can use the device as well. And all the devices are browsable, so you can flip the phone on its side, see what things would look like and that kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm connected to the internet, but I'll try it. I have to have at least one failure during a demo. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to see how my page is performing. Every delivery tier can integrate with any analytics system today because most analytics systems are tag-based or JavaScript. They're making calls out to hosted platforms. But the key is to give feedback to the authors in the form of reports. And we don't want to have them have to leave the environment to get that report and then come back and make it actionable in their environment. So we want to bring that information right into the environment for them so they can go and pull reports. And we integrate with Google Analytics out of the box. And we can go out and get a report, bring it in, and put it right over the page so that's there for them. And any report that you can query for in Google Analytics, you can query for in our platform. And any presentation you can make with the Google visualization package, we can handle as well. So this glass presentation is not the only way to do it either, but I like it. So we talked about some editing features. You can see here again we talked briefly about the idea that we can see our page state. We know the page is here. The page has got a little pencil next to it, so I know because I know the application that it's in edit, and I can see some workflow options here. For example, I could to make this object live, right? If I wanted to, as an administrator. But if I wanted to see what's going on my site, I click on the Crafter Rivet logo. This takes me out to a dashboard, and this gives me a much more detailed overview of the flow of content through my system as a whole. Again, this is a cockpit for your web managers to see what's going on in the system, so they can see things that are waiting for approval. They can see things that they've approved, but they don't want to go live until a later date, so they can schedule it and set it and forget it. We've got a recently made live queue that's listed by date, so you can see, what's been deployed. And I can see that some of these objects, they've been deployed, but they've recently been edited. So I know that even though they've recently been deployed, they're already being changed. And then below that, I've got my recent activity, so I can see the things that I personally have been working on. And So it's easy for me to keep up with where I was. And every object in the system has a basic idea of what kind of object it is. Is it a component? Is it a page? Is it in the navigation? Is it not in the navigation? And what state is it in? And we don't keep every workflow state or anything like that, but we can tell you it's in workflow. It's being edited. It's locked, and that kind of thing. Or there's a system processing. So hey, system's doing something with this object. Nobody can touch it. And we provide different levels of granularity. So here, recently made live again. As authors, I typically don't care about anything but pages. But sometimes, as an administrator, on my very small screen here, if I browse over, I might want to say like, well, what images went out? So I can go over and just change the size of the number of items I'm showing, or change this to all. And now I can see, okay, well, the system calculated a lot of different dependencies for me, sent images out, and that kind of thing. So you can see all the different types, different levels of granularity. Okay, we got about 4 more minutes. This is our context nav. This is available wherever you go in the application. Always lets you get at your information architecture. So this is how you would create a new page. You just find where you want to create a new page, right-click on it, and say New Content. If you do that, you get a dialog for all the content types that are available at that level of the information architecture, right? So you want to constrain different objects to be available at different places so authors can't make mistakes. It's easy for them. And you can constrain who has read and write permissions at different levels, and that kind of thing as well. So if I create a new article here under the About page, I say OK, then I get a new form. And again, so at this point, I'm creating a new object, so of course I want to see the whole form. It's not like in-context editing, that kind of thing yet. I need to see the whole form. I want to fill everything out. So I can, again, so I'm just going to very boringly do some stuff here. Maybe we'll make this no, there's no style sheet there. Arthur. Maybe we won't change any right rail components. I do need to set up a date here. So we'll set up a date. I can see here that this section is now full. It's easy for me to tell that. If I have any question about it, I can collapse everything. I can see all that my different sections are there, and I can then just say save and close. And now my page, this page is going to refer. I could have saved in preview too. That would take me right to the page. But here in my recently made recent activity, I can see DevCon. If I click on that, go out to the preview, and I can see my page. One more thing that's worth showing you. How do you create content types? I mentioned that we keep everything as XML in the repository, and we only create Alfresco content models when we need to. So this lets us do really cool things like this. So we can, it's not as easy. You need a technical person in Alfresco today to create a content model, but not in Craft or Rivet. So I can go into the admin console, and I can go to content types and open existing type, and we can look at maybe like the article page, which we've been working with. And here I have a complete canvas, a drag and drop canvas for me to define what fields are there. I can add new sections or remove sections. I can move things around, right? And fields can have data sources. So we actually decouple the idea of where data comes from the actual control, so that so that we don't have to keep recreating controls that look the same but get their data from somewhere else. So if you say, hey, I have a digital asset management system and I want all my image pickers to go to that, that's fine. Just you create a data source for that image management system, digital asset management system, and you're good to go. So so that's kind of it's easy to change. Maybe like we'll just change like the title here. Again, DevCon. So I just change the title of the form, save, and what I'm gonna do is click on this, open up a new tab, so we can play around a little bit, and I go find an article. And say edit. So now I can see, well, yeah, we moved that page metadata section and we changed this title, but now I don't like that that's defaulted closed. So I go back into this area here, and I say, okay, well, this metadata section, it should default open. It's a little bit hard to see, but Every time I click on a field, I'm getting a property sheet for that, and different types of controls have different property sheets. You know, it's not that I like Microsoft or anything, but Visual Basic, and it's like 4GLs that have the right idea. It's just simple property sheets and easy ways to configure things. And if I, let's say I wanted to, again, just like move the publish date first. Just pick that guy up, put it there, save, and I can just go back to my form and refresh. And now we should see the first section is going to default open, cool, and the publish date is first. So it's, you can create like real feedback for yourself. And again, your authors, as you're changing this, your authors are seeing that stuff immediately. This is how you make your platform agile. Okay, now, is there any questions? Okay, I either really sucked or I did okay. I think we're at 2:30. Is that, am I, when is this supposed to go to? Okay, I was like, I actually thought I had too many slides. Yep. Okay, I'm like, question! I got that, you're gonna be living in a van down by the river, right? Okay, no questions. What do you think? Okay. All right, thank you.